Picture this. I'm standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza while a guide explains, calm, confident, how a Bronze Age society built this colossal monument with copper tools, ramps, and sheer determination. It's a neat story. It's also the moment a tiny voice in my head whispers, "Are we sure?" Not because I want to believe in aliens or magic, but because sometimes looking carefully at the most famous stories in our history reveals seams we've smoothed over. Tonight, I want to walk you through those seams, not to debunk anyone, and definitely not to attack people who've dedicated their careers to Egyptology, but to explore why so many curious minds still feel a reasonable doubt about the Great Pyramid. We'll keep two things in view the whole time: the mainstream explanation and the questions that keep it alive with mystery. The usual starting point is ownership. Khufu. Most textbooks attribute the Great Pyramid to the 4th dynasty pharaoh around 2560 BCE. A big part of that attribution traces to markings found inside high sealed chambers, red painted signs, including a cartouche interpreted as Khufu. The discovery story is dramatic. In the 1830s, during a period of adventurous and sometimes destructive exploration, a team reported finding these markings as they opened interior spaces. Critics have argued ever since about how to interpret that moment. Some say the context was messy. Others point out that paint, not carved inscription, is unusual for something you'd expect to be formal and royal. Supporters, on the other hand, emphasize that work gang marks in red ochre are known elsewhere in Egyptian construction and that the style aligns with practical quarry or crew notations, not ceremonial art. I wasn't there. None of us were. What I can say is this: one moment in the 1800s shouldn't have to carry the entire weight of a monument story. It should be one piece in a much larger mosaic. So let's zoom out. Another major argument for the 4th dynasty date is context. The Great Pyramid sits in a landscape of other 4th dynasty pyramids and cemeteries. Therefore, it likely belongs to the same time. That reasoning makes intuitive sense, the same way you'd assume 3 new houses on a block probably went up within the same decade. And yet, it also raises a caution. Archaeological sites can evolve in layers. Later builders often repurposed, renovated, or framed earlier structures. That happens all over the world. So while context is a strong clue, it can't be the only one. The honest version of the story is that context supports the consensus, but it doesn't end the conversation. What about scientific dating? In the 1980s and since, researchers took tiny samples of organic material in mortars and tested them. Many results clustered around the mid-3rd millennium BCE, which is exactly what the mainstream would expect. The catch is that radiocarbon can only date organic bits, not stone. So, in a structure that's been repaired, patched, and touched across millennia, you have to ask, are we dating original work, later maintenance, or a mix? That's not a flaw of the science. It's just what the method can and cannot tell us. When results vary, you face interpretation. Do differing dates mean different building phases? Do they reflect contamination? Or are they simply the noise you expect when sampling small scattered materials across a giant monument? Reasonable people can look at the same spreadsheet and come away with slightly different emphasis. That doesn't make either side dishonest. It just means there's still room at the edges for debate. Now step inside. The king's chamber is stark. Granite blocks, precise joints, a single stone coffer. If this was a royal burial, Why is it so bare compared with the lavish, text-covered tombs we see elsewhere? The mainstream answer is straightforward. Pyramids and valley temple complexes serve different ritual purposes across time. Decoration practices evolved. Grave goods are irresistible to thieves, and the survival of one sealed, treasure-packed tomb like Tutankhamun's is the exception that proves the rule. Fair points. Still, even granting theft and loss, the minimalism here feels uncanny. It invites a second look at function. Could the interior have had a purpose beyond or in addition to housing a body? Function brings us to engineering. The foundation spans more than 13 acres and is astonishingly level. The joints between many stones are tight enough to make you wince if you try to slip in a blade. The relieving chambers above the king's chamber distribute load with an elegance
None of this
any
requires
modern
exotic
structural
technology
engineer
to
would
appreciate.
admire. It just requires patience, skill, and the organizational ability to maintain standards across a project that would break lesser teams. The mainstream explanation emphasizes ramps, sledges, manpower, and seasonal labor. Skeptics counter with logistics. 2+ million blocks in roughly 2 decades implies a relentless pace. Some blocks are massive, and the granite, sourced far to the south, adds significant transport complexity. Both sides can cite experiments and reconstructions. Both sides can poke holes in the other's favorite demo. The truth may be a blend of ingenious methods, clever scheduling, and techniques that don't survive cleanly in the record, because technology isn't only about machines, it's also about processes. Then there's alignment. The Great Pyramid's orientation to true north is exquisite. So precise it's hard not to take a breath and admire it. You don't need lasers to do this, but you do need sky knowledge, discipline, and repeatable measurement. Likewise, the subtle 8-sided effect, those faint concavities that reveal themselves under very specific light, might be intentional or incidental to weight and settling. Either way, design choices here aren't random. They speak to people who cared obsessively about geometry, repeatable angles, and the language of stone. What about the mathematics that swirl around the pyramid, claims that its proportions echo pi or the golden ratio, or that its latitude matches a modern constant like the speed of light? Here, I want to be careful. It's fascinating to notice patterns. It's also easy to overfit, especially with a structure old enough to have suffered casing loss, earthquakes, and weathering. Measurements vary depending on which reference line you use, original casing versus surviving core, and how you handle erosion. If you look for coincidences in a universe of numbers, you will find them. At the same time, it's entirely reasonable to think the builders chose elegant proportions on purpose. The line between deliberate design and numerical pareidolia is thin. My position is simple. Enjoy the mathematics. Present them as possibilities, not proofs. Astronomy invites the same humility. The Giza layout and celestial correlations are compelling to many people. Some researchers argue the pyramids mirror Orion's belt. Others caution that star maps can be retrofitted across many arrangements, and precession over thousands of years complicates any one-to-one match. So here's the balanced way to share it. There are intriguing alignments and hypotheses worth exploring. They are debated, and none are settled enough to carry the entire argument by themselves. When we hear about hidden voids and mysterious corridors, the imagination goes wild. In recent years, non-invasive techniques like muon imaging have revealed previously unknown spaces inside the pyramid. That is incredibly exciting. No matter where you land on the debate, New tools are giving us safer ways to X-ray stone and refine our understanding. It's natural that access is cautious. This is one of the world's most precious heritage sites. It's also natural that the public wants answers right now. Between those instincts is a narrow bridge. My hope is simple. More data, more transparency, more patience, less sensationalism. All of this brings us to the human part of the story, the part we rarely discuss. Institutions build narratives, not because people are villains, but because careers, tourism, national pride, and years of research momentum are real factors. Changing a big story is slow. Skeptics, on the other hand, can sometimes overcorrect, turning question marks into exclamation points. If we want a better conversation, both sides have to resist those easy extremes. The most responsible position is also the most interesting one. Celebrate the consensus for what it explains and keep an open file for the questions it doesn't. So, what do I think happened here? I think the people who conceived and built the Great Pyramid, whenever precisely we date every phase, were capable of more than we tend to grant them, not because they had lasers or lost super machines, but because human ingenuity plus time is an engine most of us underestimate. Give skilled builders a century of tradition, a culture that treats precision as sacred, a river for transport, seasonal labor cycles, administrative oversight, and a shared cosmic purpose. And you can get results that still astonish us. That explanation doesn't close the door on surprises. It opens it to a richer view of the past, where known techniques and clever processes do most of the lifting, and a few details may still surprise us as we learn more. And yet, my sense of wonder doesn't depend on certainty. It grows from the tension between what we know and what we don't. Maybe there were multiple construction phases, earlier works repurposed or enveloped by later projects. Maybe some inscriptions reflect crews and logistics more than ceremony. Maybe repairs muddle dates. Maybe voids are relieving spaces we haven't mapped. Simple engineering, cleverly done. Or maybe, buried under stone and time, are features we haven't imagined yet. The point is not to force a mystery where none exists, or to dismiss a mystery because it's inconvenient. The point is to let the evidence, old and new, keep teaching us. So if you feel that little voice, the one that says, "Are we sure?" You're not alone. You can honor that curiosity without disrespecting the scholars who have given us so much. You can share alternative hypotheses without declaring them facts. You can appreciate the elegance of a ramp while admitting we don't have the full blueprint. You can be inspired by numerical patterns while acknowledging measurement caveats. You can hold enthusiasm and caution in the same hand. Look again at the casing stones that remain at the neighboring pyramid and imagine the Great Pyramid gleaming white, edges knife-sharp against a dark blue sky. Imagine surveyors watching stars, marking lines, adjusting, checking again. Imagine teams shaping stone until tolerances tighten from good to perfect. Imagine managers counting days by the river's rhythm and craftsmen teaching apprentices the feel of a flush joint. No conspiracy required, just a civilization choosing to build with a seriousness we rarely demand of ourselves. And if, one day, a carefully supervised robot camera peeks behind a door we've only seen in grainy footage and finds a relic that reframes a chapter, good. Science welcomes amends. If updated radiocarbon samples, taken and documented with rigorous chain of custody, cluster more tightly around one period, good. Add it to the stack. If muon scans resolve a void as nothing more than a structural cavity, good. Engineering elegance confirmed. If they reveal a genuine surprise, also good. The story is not a statue. It's a living model that gets better with each measurement. Here's the resolution I'm offering for me and for you. The Great Pyramid does not need supernatural help to be extraordinary. It doesn't need perfect certainty to be inspiring. It asks something harder of us, to be both humble and bold. Humble enough to admit what we don't know, bold enough to keep looking. The mainstream view that Khufu's Egypt built this monument in the 4th dynasty remains the strongest, most widely supported explanation. At the same time, specific details remain debated, and it's healthy to examine them. That's how knowledge grows. That's how we avoid trading one dogma for another. So tonight, let's give ourselves permission to marvel without mythologizing and to question without accusing. Let's credit the builders for what they clearly achieved: organization on a staggering scale, geometry refined in stone, alignments that honored the sky, and a legacy so durable that we are still here, thousands of years later, trying to catch up. If future evidence sharpens dates, clarifies methods, or surprises us with something genuinely new, we'll welcome it. Until then, the Great Pyramid stands, patient, precise, and more than enough, reminding us that the past is not small, and our curiosity doesn't have to be either. Because in the end, the real message carved into those stones might be less about numbers and more about intent. Aim high, care about details, align your work with something larger than yourself, and accept that the greatest projects outlive their instructions, leaving the next generation to rediscover the how with fresh eyes. That's not a mystery to fear. That's an invitation to keep learning. And that, for me, is the wonder of Giza. Not that it hides a secret no one is allowed to know, but that it keeps revealing new ones to anyone willing to look closely, ask carefully, and revise honestly. The monument is silent. We are the ones who decide whether that silence is the end of the story or the start of a better question.